everyone. I'm Georgia Wilkinson, the Communications Officer for the General Federation of Trade Unions. And today I'm joined by Doug Nicholls, the former GFTU General Secretary, who has kindly agreed to answer a few questions on the cost of living crisis and how to get out of it book. He is written alongside James Meadway and Kostas Labavitsis. Great to see you, Doug. Really appreciate your time today.
Pleasure. Good to see you too. And here's the little book.
Oh, brilliant. You've got a copy. Lovely. So first question for you is that we know that the book is based on the pamphlet, The True Causes of Inflation, Weak Production and High Profits. What motivated you to participate in writing the book?
Well, we thought that there were just some elements of the earlier pamphlet that needed to be expanded a little bit. And with the excellent publisher Verso, they do this series in this sort of pocket format, which enabled us to get a bit more content in, but to retain hopefully the accessible and popular style that we wanted, so that we could cut through some of the gobbledygook that's usually spoken about the economy and put it in terms and ideas that everyone can grasp. So just to expand the original pamphlet, to go with a good publisher that could get it widely spread around the country.
Brilliant. And why is this subject important to you?
Well, it's important to everyone, isn't it? I mean, no one can afford to live really, except a few people at the very, very top whose wealth has multiplied at the expense of the rest of us. So with such a dramatic impact on people's lifestyles, their ability to grow and prosper, their ability to afford the most basics of life, this is the issue of our day, isn't it? How people are being exploited and driven deliberately into poverty, while those at the top rake it in and get richer and richer and richer. It's the distinctive thing of our time. Previous generations managed to narrow the inequality gap. Unfortunately, during our lifetime over the last couple of decades, and particularly in recent years, that gap has got wider and wider and wider. And despite the vast wealth of the country, those at the top have amassed the profits, accumulated the capital, while the rest of us find it difficult even to afford food, decent housing and energy. So it's the issue of the day, and we thought it needed to be tackled.
No, 100%. I completely agree with you. Will there be any other publications on this topic at all?
Well, it's not going to go away, unfortunately, is it? So people are going to have to write more and more about it, although we'd like to think that we've got down to the main points in this little book that need to be perhaps looked at a bit more closely in education events and in other more specific publications. But getting the general message out there that high profits mean low wages and high prices mean those wages don't go very far. The simple message that this is all politically and economically constructed. It's not like the weather. It doesn't just happen. It's happened because those at the top want to make more profits at the expense of the rest of us. And of course, when the rest of us start to argue for pay rises through our unions, those at the top say that we're causing inflation. So it's been absolutely ludicrous. But also, I do remember quite a while ago, in the late 70s, there was confusion in the trade union movement about that subject. In fact, there was a special congress organised by the TUC to argue that workers should not campaign for higher pay. They should have pay restraint, because they believe that the higher wages went up, the more it contributed to inflation. But that daft argument now has completely gone. And I think everyone recognises that the unions who've been fighting for pay have had massive public support, and everyone understands that it's not the unions arguing for more wages that is the cause of inflation.
100%. I didn't actually know that, so I've learnt something today. But yes, I'm glad that that we've moved swiftly on from that. Um,
Definitely.
do you think the cost of living, how do you think the cost of living crisis will play out going into 2024? Have you got any views on that?
Well, unfortunately, at the end of our book, The Cost of Living Crisis, and How to Get Out of It, we did look in particular at food prices, and we said that they were going to continue to rise. And generally speaking, although I haven't just looked at it closely this week, but generally speaking, I think that's the case. It seems to me, looking at the petrol pump prices, that petrol is not going down. It seems to me higher this week than it has been recently. And we all know that we're entering a period where our energy bills are going to affect us all badly. And there's been no real containment of the soaring costs of the basics of energy. And we've seen there been a dip in the prices of housing. I mean, the housing market in Britain has been massively overinflated, a really exceptional market, actually, in the world, in that so much of it depends on house sales and ownership rather than rent. There's been a dip in house prices, but generally speaking, housing is still unaffordable and still, so many young people just simply cannot get on the housing ladder. My generation, more or less, people could leave school or leave university or whatever, leave their family home and get onto the housing market to build their own families. But that's not so common anymore. So the very basics of life are still unaffordable, and that has to change.
Oh no, definitely. Again, 100% agree with you there. Um, Going back to the book, then, it makes some clear policy recommendations for the government. Can you explain those and comment on whether this is a likely course for an incoming Labour administration?
Well, if I tell you what all the proposals are, you won't encourage people to read the book, but I'll give you a flavour of some of them. Obviously, wages have got to go up in line with inflation, and that means a return to union organisation and membership. And once people are in unions, they've got to have the ability to negotiate for wages, which is called collective bargaining. And when I started out in the trade union movement in the late 70s, over 80% of workers in the country had their wages negotiated by a trade union through collective bargaining. Now it's less than 20%. So until we fully get back the right to negotiate through collective bargaining, we're going to have difficulty getting wages to rise. But of course, there are other things that need to be urgently done. We've got to restrain the profits of the greedy gulls and cormorants, as they used to be called in the Middle Ages, the people who accumulate capital and make tons of profit. We've got to restrain their excessive profit making. And of course, one of the essential mechanisms for doing that is to have price controls. There used to be price controls. Certain commodities could not be put up beyond certain percentages, and so on. We have to create a system whereby the essentials of life are and their prices are properly controlled. Food, heat and light, housing, transport, etc. They've got to be properly controlled. And here's a novel one. What about reducing some taxes for the smaller employers and the smaller businesses? I mean, they've been hit very, very hard by, particularly by energy price rises and so on. And while we're on the question of energy, prices generally have gone up in the different energy departments, as it were, because energy has been privatized. Our energy is there to make a profit. It should be nationalised. Uh, Energy like gas and electricity, and I suppose water and all the other renewables must be part of a nationally publicly owned system with reasonable prices attached to it. But we've identified in the book, which I don't think other people have done so much, but we've identified two big sort of deep level things which have to be done if we're to stop the continual recurrence of inflation. And they're big things, but I'll just touch on them briefly. Firstly, generally speaking, if you take the economy as a whole, prices go up when there's lower supply. Now, if you take that as a whole, over the whole economy, we have seen Britain's productive industrial manufacturing base almost destroyed. It was a unique development in Britain that the workshop of the world, all the factories were closed. And until we get back to the idea of making things, making them in Britain for consumption in Britain and not going on the energy inefficient, very ungreen international global markets and relying on imports, until we can start producing all the stuff we need, whether it's typewriters or tables or medical equipment for the hospitals, if we can produce it in Britain with a strong manufacturing base based on a clear industrial policy, we will create the wealth which will create the supply that we need to reduce prices. And then finally, another deep level one, we've seen a huge shift in our economy away from production and manufacturing to the dominance of the finance sector. So making money by making money, profiteering without producing things, speculating, gambling, putting the money on the money markets, not making stuff, but simply gambling with the surplus value that's created and all our money that we put into the banks. That's got to change. There's got to be a re-gearing towards the productive economy, and the government has got to find new ways of getting the money that it needs to run the public services and invest in an industrial strategy without relying on the finance sector. The traditional approach has been to borrow money from the banks, which they claim back over years at higher interest, in order to invest in our public services. That's got to change. The Bank of England will need to come back under public control. We'll need to create a national bank. We'll need to have investments in a national system, which will lead to investment in the productive economy. So there are some kind of short-term, quick things that have to be done, and then there's these deeper restructuring things that have to be done to the British economy if it's to stop inflation longer term.
That's really interesting. Thanks for that, Doug. If you want to find out more, then the book is available on the GFTU website. But that's a really great highlight of things that you've covered in the book. Thanks for that. Do you have any advice for those struggling at the moment?
You mean struggling because of the financial difficulties?
Yes.
Well, don't struggle alone. Join a union and get together with your workmates and get together with people in your community and get together with the trade union movement in trying to reverse this and get things like this book shared and get debates about what causes the cost of living crisis and how we can get out of it, because we're the only people who can do that. No need to suffer alone or in silence, or just, think that all you can do is go to the food bank or tighten your belt or whatever. That's not the solution to this long term. It's getting engaged together in collective action to change things that will make all the difference. And the most basic part of that is if you're in work, join a union, get active in the union. If you're not in work or whatever, get involved in one of the thousands of community organisations that will exist in your area and get them to start campaigning for the kind of economic changes we need.
That's excellent advice. Thanks a lot, Doug. And finally, on a more personal note, how are you enjoying your retirement?
Well, I'm really enjoying myself. I had a new grandson in April called Luca, and my granddaughter was 5 last weekend. So I've got time to tickle them a bit more than I would have done. And also, I mean, I think retirement is important for everyone, even if you've had a fantastic, enjoyable job like myself in the trade union movement. It's really important that we have, a time after the age of whatever it is, 65, 67, to slow down, because I certainly don't miss the thousands of emails every day. And I certainly don't miss the thousands of Zoom calls and other meetings every day. And it's important that, for the last 100 years of our lives, we get an opportunity to reflect, calm down, slow down, and enjoy ourselves.
Brilliant. Well, congratulations on your new grandson, and I'm
Thank you.
glad you're able to spend a lot more family time. That's brilliant. Doug, thank you for your time today. For any interested, the pamphlet and book are available, as I said previously, on the GFTU website if you'd like to take a look at those. We've also got the upcoming cost of living crisis course available to unions across the movement, starting on the 8th of November. Please make sure that for the first session you apply by the 27th of October. Details of this can be found by visiting gftu.org.uk/learning-opportunities. Thank you all for watching, and we'll see you soon.